Title: The HOA Tyrant's Downfall. The trouble started on a warm Saturday morning. I was elbow-deep in an oil change on my 1972 Chevy C10, enjoying the quiet, when I heard the sharp clack of expensive heels on my gravel driveway. I didn't even have to look up. "Jack," came the voice, sweet as venom. Karen Delacroix, HOA president, self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, and my personal nightmare, stood at the edge of my driveway in her ridiculous floral dress and oversized sunglasses, arms crossed like she was about to issue a court ruling. I wiped my hands on a rag and glanced up. "Karen, to what do I owe the pleasure? We need to talk about that." She jabbed a manicured finger at my truck, her nose wrinkling like she had just caught a whiff of rotting garbage. I followed her gaze. "You mean my truck?" "I mean that rusted pile of junk ruining the neighborhood's aesthetic," she said. "The HOA has received multiple complaints, and I'm afraid I'll have to issue a formal violation notice." I let out a sharp laugh, tossing the rag onto my workbench. "Violation notice? Karen, I don't belong to your HOA." She smiled, a slow, calculated stretch of her lips. "Your property may technically be outside our jurisdiction, but your presence affects our home values. And as a good neighbor, you should want to comply with our guidelines." I folded my arms. "That's not how this works. I bought this land fair and square. I don't pay HOA fees. I don't follow HOA rules." Her smile faltered, eyes narrowing. "Then I suppose I'll have to escalate this." And with that, she pulled a folded document from her purse and handed it to me. A violation notice. Completely bogus, but official-looking enough that most people would panic. I glanced at it, then back at her. "Nice try, Karen. But this means nothing." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "We'll see about that." That was the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, the harassment escalated. First came the noise complaints about my non-existent late-night parties. Then, anonymous reports about my farm animals being a nuisance. Then, the county inspector showed up because someone had claimed my barn was a health hazard. I knew exactly who was behind it. One evening, after another long day of dealing with Karen's nonsense, my best friend Dave stopped by. He leaned against my truck, sipping a beer, watching me with amusement. "You know," he said, "you could just move the truck into the barn. Keep the peace." I shot him a look. "You think this is about the truck anymore? Karen's on a power trip. If I give her an inch, she'll take a mile." Dave chuckled. "So what's the plan?" I grinned. "Oh, I've got something in mind." The next morning, I drafted an email to Karen and the HOA board. I attached official zoning records proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that my property was not subject to their rules. Then, for good measure, I added a legal disclaimer about harassment and how I'd be happy to take this to court if they kept pushing. I hit send. A few hours later, Karen's response arrived. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression. She reluctantly acknowledged my legal standing, but strongly encouraged me to be mindful of how my choices affected the greater community. Translation: she knew she couldn't win legally, so she was switching to outright war. 2 days later, I woke up to find a bright orange sticker slapped onto my truck's windshield. "Unauthorized vehicle. Must be removed immediately." I stared at it in disbelief. Karen had escalated again. Enough was enough. That night, I made some calls. By the next morning, I had a shipment of brand-new, fully functional farm equipment delivered. Not just any equipment. Massive tractors, hay balers, and a gleaming new livestock trailer. And I parked every single one of them along the property line, in full view of Karen's pristine neighborhood. The best part? Each vehicle was 100% legal. By noon, Karen was at my door, her face a deep shade of red. "Jack," she screeched. "What is this?" I took my time adjusting my hat before answering. "Oh, these." I gestured to the massive hulking machines. "Just some new additions to my farm. You know, real working vehicles. Thought I'd upgrade from my old truck." Karen's eye twitched. "You did this on purpose." I feigned innocence. "Did what?" "It's my property. I'm just being mindful of my choices and how they affect the greater community." Her jaw clenched. She stormed off. But I wasn't stupid. I knew this wasn't over. Sure enough, the next day, animal control showed up at my door. A white county vehicle rolled up my driveway, its flashing orange light making my stomach sink. 2 officers stepped out, both in official-looking uniforms with animal control stitched onto their jackets. I wiped the sweat off my forehead and walked over. "Morning, officers. What can I do for you? The taller of the two, a no-nonsense guy with graying hair, pulled out a clipboard. Sir, we've received multiple complaints about neglected and malnourished animals on this property. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I crossed my arms. Neglected animals? That's funny, considering I just bought top-quality feed 2 days ago and had a vet checkup last week. The second officer, a younger woman, looked a little uncomfortable. Sir, we still need to do a routine inspection. It's standard procedure when we receive multiple complaints. I already knew who was behind this. Karen had run out of fake HOA violations, so she'd turned to outright fabricating lies. I took a deep breath. All right, follow me. We walked through the property. My healthy cows grazing, my well-fed chickens pecking away, my clean stables stocked with fresh hay. After 30 minutes, the officers exchanged glances. Honestly, sir, the older officer said, flipping his clipboard shut, this is one of the cleanest farms I've inspected. The younger officer nodded. Yeah, we've seen bad cases before, but your animals look great. I smirked. Let me guess. You got an anonymous tip. The older officer gave me a knowing look. Something like that. You wouldn't happen to have issues with your neighbors, would you? I let out a dry laugh. Oh, you have no idea. Karen didn't take defeat well. The moment animal control left, I knew she'd be planning her next move. She wasn't just a bully, she was obsessed with control. And I had publicly humiliated her. That night, my phone lit up with notifications. The neighborhood Facebook group was on fire. Karen had posted a long, dramatic rant about irresponsible landowners and how certain people were endangering property values and community safety. She didn't name me outright, but she didn't have to. The comment section was a battlefield. Are you talking about Jack? Because he's the only one with a farm. This is harassment. The guy's got a legal farm, and you just don't like it. Karen, you called animal control on a guy with perfectly healthy animals? Seriously. The more she tried to justify herself, the worse it got. Within 2 hours, the post was deleted. And the next morning, something even better happened. A neighbor named Lisa Whitman, who had always been on the HOA board's good side, sent me a message. Jack, I think you should know. Karen's been using HOA funds for some shady things. I have proof. Let me know if you want to talk. I stared at the message, then cracked a grin. Karen had finally messed with the wrong person. Lisa and I met at the local coffee shop. She slid a thick manila folder across the table. I made copies of everything. I opened it up, and holy hell, Karen was in deep. There were receipts for personal purchases labeled as community expenses. She had billed the HOA for spa treatments, dinners at high-end restaurants, and even a weekend trip to a beach resort. And here's the best part, Lisa said, smirking. She tried to cover it up by inflating repair costs. Look at the invoices. I flipped through the papers. Sure enough, she had falsified records for landscaping improvements. That never happened. Lisa took a sip of her coffee. Jack, if this gets out, she's done. I nodded, already forming a plan. It's going to get out. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. Karen sat at the front, completely unaware of what was coming. I raised my hand. I have some questions about the HOA's financial records. Karen's expression darkened. This is not the time. Actually, I cut her off. It is. Because I have documents that prove you've been embezzling funds. A murmur swept through the crowd. I walked to the front of the room and handed copies to each board member. Karen's face turned ghostly white. These are lies. Fabricated, she shrieked. Lisa stood up. Karen, I pulled these straight from the HOA's own records. The room erupted. You stole our HOA fees. We pay thousands a year for this nonsense. Karen, you're done. The HOA board had no choice. By the end of the meeting, they voted Karen out. And the icing on the cake? They reported her to the state HOA regulatory board. Karen wasn't just losing her position. She was about to face real legal consequences. 2 weeks later, Karen's house went up for sale. The HOA board issued a formal apology to the entire neighborhood and promised new leadership. And me? I enjoyed every second of watching Karen's empire crumble. One evening, Dave and I sat on my porch, beers in hand, watching as Karen's moving truck rolled away. So, Dave said, raising his drink, what did we learn? I smirked. Never start a war you can't win. Karen had tried to rule with fear. And in the end, she had lost everything. I tipped my hat back and stretched. For the first time in months, the neighborhood was finally at peace.